Hello, and welcome to the session on calculations with negative numbers. What are we going to learn in this session? We'll first understand how do we add and subtract on a number line and then also on a vertical scale. We'll then go on to find out a general rule of adding and subtracting numbers. And finally, we'll also understand a general rule for multiplying and dividing numbers. Most of these rules will be understood in the context of negative numbers. Let's get started then. Now, we are all familiar with adding and subtracting numbers on a number line. This has been taught to us right from primary school. For instance, if I were to do 3 plus 4, we were told you start at 3, and because you're adding, you go right. Okay, adding will always go right. For subtracting, you go left. So now you go right 4 steps because it's plus 4. You add 4. So you go right 4 steps from 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So you land on 7. So the answer is 7. Right? We are familiar with this technique. For instance, if you were to do 7 minus 10, you start from 7. Because it is minus, you go left on the number line. How many steps? It's minus 10, so you go 10 steps to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So there you go. You land upon minus 3, which means the answer for that calculation is minus 3. Now, of course, this is an interesting method and useful method to add and subtract numbers, and it's very easy to understand as well. However, one big problem is this method cannot be done for big numbers. So with my years of experience, I have realized that understanding adding and subtracting on a horizontal scale can be confusing for some, but the minute I convert it into a vertical scale, things becomes easy to comprehend because we have many real life examples associated with vertical scales. Didn't understand what I said? Well, let's flip this over to make it vertical. And you get a thermometer, right? Thermometer is a vertical scale. And we have been calculating temperatures many times, right, in our lives. For instance, if you were told decrease of 20 degrees Celsius from 10 degrees Celsius, how would you calculate? So you start from 10 degrees Celsius and you decrease by 20 degrees Celsius. So you start at 10 and go down 20 degrees, you'll end up at minus 10. So the final answer is minus 10 degrees Celsius. The mathematical equivalent of this calculation is 10 minus 20, which is equal to minus 10. So you start from 10, you subtract 20, decrease is subtract 20, and you end up at minus 10. So 10 minus 20 is minus 10, right? Let's take one more example. Decrease of 10 degrees Celsius from minus 10 degrees Celsius. So you start from minus 10 because it says from minus 10 degrees Celsius. So you start from minus 10. And because it's a decrease of 10 degrees Celsius, you go down, right? Decrease is down. So from minus 10, you go down 10 degrees. You will end up at minus 20 degrees Celsius. The mathematical calculation for this is minus 10 minus 10. So you start from minus 10 and you subtract 10. Minus 10 equals to minus 20. Okay, I know it's kind of confusing because you're looking at it for the first time. So let's do one more. Increase of 50 degrees Celsius from minus 20 degrees Celsius. So it says from minus 20. So you start from minus 20 and you increase 50 degrees Celsius, which means you go up 50 degrees. So from minus 20, if you go up 50 degrees, you will end up at plus 30. So the mathematical equivalent of that is from minus 20, you increase 50, which is plus 50, which is the same as plus 30, because that's what we have ended up at, right? So thermometers and temperature calculation is something which I have been doing on a regular basis. Now let me show you something more familiar in terms of vertical scale. an apartment, right? As you can see, this is an apartment. The 0 is your ground level. There are 8 stories, okay, above the ground level. And let's say there are some levels below the ground level as well. Okay, these are basements or parking or whatever. Okay, so there are 8 levels below the ground level. There are 8 levels above the ground level, and 0 is your ground level, right? So you're familiar with this. So if I were to do 5 plus 3, it means you're starting from floor number 5 and you're going up 3 steps, right? So you start from floor number 5, and because it is plus, you're going up 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. So you go up 3 floors, you end up at the 8th floor. So 5 plus 3 is plus 8. Okay, does it sound more familiar than the previous example of temperature? Okay, you could use any of these scales to understand this. Okay, let's take one more example. 3 minus 5. So you're starting from floor number 3, and minus 5 means you're going down 5 floors. Where will you end up at? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're going down, or you're reaching the basement level 2, which means minus 2. So 3 minus 5 is minus 2. Perfect. Next, minus 3 minus 5. So you're already starting at minus 3, which means you're already 3 levels below. And you're going further down. Minus 5 means from there, you're going further down 5 floors. Where would you reach? Well, you will reach 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the minus 8th level, which means 8 levels below 0. So your answer is minus 8. And finally, minus 2 plus 6. How about that? You start from minus 2, which is 2 floors below the base level, and you go up 6 floors. Where will you reach? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You'll reach on the 4th floor, which is plus 4. Right? Now you can use any of these horizontal or vertical scales to understand this easier. Okay, my years of experience suggest that students are easily understood this particular concept when it's a vertical scale because of many real life examples associated with it. But the problem with both these methods, be it horizontal or vertical, is it's limited to small numbers. Okay, because if it's a big number like a plus 72 minus 63 or something like that, then it's impossible to draw even a horizontal scale or a vertical scale for that matter. So for that, we need some general rules to add or subtract numbers. So let's have a look at that. But before that, let's look at something special. This is about number and its tail. What? Number has a tail? Yes, you'll be surprised. Every number has a tail. Some numbers don't have tail, but I'll tell you what's the meaning of that as well. Okay, so what is number and its tail? The body of the number is the magnitude of the number. The magnitude is the value that it carries. Okay, so the magnitude could be 1, 2, 3, 53, 67, anything. Okay, any value that the number carries. That's the body of the number. It can also be in decimals format. Okay, 1.5, 2.3, 3.75. All of these are value that the numbers can carry. So what's the tail of a number? The tail of a number is the sign it carries. Yeah, it is plus or minus. It can be a positive number or a negative number. So every number has a tail. There cannot be a number without a tail. Every number can be positive or negative, a plus or a minus, right? Positive numbers are preceded by a plus sign or sometimes no sign. So some numbers have no tail, but that's again a positive number. A number without a tail, as in no sign before it, is still a positive number. Okay, so positive numbers are preceded by plus sign or no sign. Okay, so examples of positive numbers are plus 5, plus 4.3, plus 13.75, or simply without any sign. Okay, 7, 6.25. All of these are positive numbers. On the other hand, negative numbers are strictly preceded by a minus sign. Okay, examples: minus 2, minus 9.8, minus 15.12. All of these are negative numbers. So as you can see, each number has a tail. It can be plus or minus. Sometimes numbers do not have a tail, they are still positive numbers. In a calculation, you should be able to figure out whether a number is positive or negative. So let's understand this pretty well using these examples. So let's say we have 6 plus 3. Now, what can you say about the number 6 and the number 3? What is the body and what is the tail? As in, what is the sign? As in, what's the magnitude and what's the sign? The first number has a magnitude of 6. And because there's no sign preceding it, remember the sign will always precede it before it, okay? It is a positive number. Because there's no sign preceding it, it's a positive number. Remember, numbers without any tail are positive. Okay. What about the second number? The second number has a magnitude of 3 and there's a plus sign preceding it. So that's again a positive number. Let's take some more examples. How about 6 minus 3? The first number has a magnitude of 6, as you can see, but it has no tail preceding it, which means it's again a positive number. The second number has a magnitude of 3 and it has a minus sign before it, so that's a negative number. How about minus 6 plus 3? That's pretty easy, right? The first number has a magnitude of 6 and it's a negative number because there's a minus sign preceding it. The second number has a magnitude of 3 and there's a plus sign preceding it, which means that's a positive number. And finally, how about this? It's pretty clear that both the numbers are negative because there's minus sign preceding each one of them. The first one has a magnitude of 6 and it's a negative number. The second one has a magnitude of 3 and that's again a negative number, right? With this as a background, let's now build some rules for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing numbers. First, let's begin with adding and subtracting numbers. Now, there are two different rules. One rule is for numbers having the same sign, and the other rule is for numbers having opposite sign. So what do we do if the numbers have the same sign? We add their values or add their magnitude. Remember the body part. So we add them and the sign of the final answer will be the same as the sign of the number with the bigger value or the bigger magnitude, right? On the other hand, in case of numbers having opposite signs, we subtract their magnitude or subtract their values. And once again, the sign of the final answer will be the sign of the number with the bigger value. Okay, let's take an example. Okay, this might seem mumbo jumbo to you, complicated. So let's understand this using examples. So let's say 5 plus 3. Now, as you know, each of these numbers is positive because 5 is not preceded by any sign. So it's plus as in positive. 3 is again a positive number because it's preceded by a plus sign. So as per the rule, what we do is we add the values. 5 plus 3 is 8. And we then use the sign of the number with bigger magnitude. Which is a number with bigger magnitude? It is 5. And what's 5? Is it positive or negative? It's positive. So your final answer will be plus 8. How about this? Minus 3, minus 6. Once again, both the numbers are negative because both the numbers are preceded by a minus sign. So they are negative. So as per the rule, we'll first add the values. 3 plus 6 is 9. That gives you the magnitude of the final answer. And how do we decide upon the sign? Which is the number with bigger magnitude between 3 and 6? It is 6. And what is the sign of 6? It is negative, right? Minus. So your final answer will be minus 9. Interesting, right? Okay. What about numbers with different or opposite signs? Let's have a look at some examples of that. 7 minus 4. Now, as you know, 7, there's no sign preceding it, which means that's a positive number. 4 is a negative number because there's minus sign preceding it. So they are numbers having opposite sign. So as per the rule, we'll subtract the magnitude. 7 minus 4 is 3. And how do we put the sign for 3? We look at which has a bigger magnitude, 7 or 4? It's 7. And what's the sign of 7? It is plus, right? 7 is a positive number. So it's plus, which means your final answer will be plus 3. And finally, minus 8 plus 2. Once again, the first number is negative, the second one is positive. So numbers with opposite sign. The rule says we subtract their magnitude or subtract their values. So 8 minus 2 is 6. That will be the magnitude of the final answer. And for the sign, I will look at which number is bigger, which one has a bigger magnitude, 8 or 2. It's 8. And 8 is negative. Remember, that's a minus sign before 8. So that's negative, which means your final answer will also be negative, which means it will be minus 6. Please understand these two rules for adding and subtracting numbers, especially in the context of negative numbers, right? Let's look at it from bigger numbers perspective, because the smaller numbers we could have always added and subtracted on a number line or any of those vertical scales that we saw. The importance of this method is for adding and subtracting big numbers. So let's take some examples of big numbers. Let's say minus 72 plus 46. What can you say about these two numbers? Clearly, they are numbers having opposite signs, and hence we'll first subtract them to find the magnitude of the answer. So 72 minus 46 is 26. And for the sign, we'll look at the one with the bigger magnitude, which in this case is 72, which is negative, and hence your final answer will be minus 26. Right, minus 15 minus 82. Now clearly both of the numbers are negative, which means they are of the same sign. So what will we do for the magnitude? We'll add the magnitude. So 15 plus 82 is 97. And for the sign, we'll always look at the one with the bigger number. Okay, the bigger number is 82 out of the two, and 82 is negative. So your answer will also be negative, which means minus 97 is your final answer. And finally, minus 34 plus 76. What do you think? They are clearly numbers with opposite signs. So as per rule, we'll subtract them. 76 minus 34 is 42. And for the sign of the number, we'll look at which one is a bigger number. In this case, it is 76, which is positive, right? There's a plus sign preceding it. So your final answer will be plus 42. Now, aren't these rules very important? Okay, they are so convenient. Now that you understood the rules, okay, adding and subtracting even big numbers becomes possible because of that. Okay, the only catch was what sign do you put? Okay, the sign will always be of the number with bigger magnitude. Right, now what about multiplying and dividing numbers? Now these are very simple rules. Okay, you will understand this within no time. Once again, we have two different rules, one for numbers with the same sign and the other one for numbers having opposite signs. If the numbers have the same sign, you multiply and divide their magnitudes normally, their values normally, and your sign will always be positive in this case. On the other hand, when the numbers have opposite signs, you multiply and divide normally, but the sign of this one will always be negative. Okay, let's take examples. 5 times 3. As you know, both these numbers are positive. So you'll first multiply their uh, multiply their magnitudes. 5 multiplied by 3 is 15. And because both the numbers are positive, they are of the same sign, your final answer will always be positive, right? How about minus 4 times minus 6? Once again, let's multiply their magnitudes. 4 times 6 is 24. Because both the numbers have the same sign, minus and minus, right? Both are negative. The final answer will again be positive. So it's plus 24. How about minus 36 divided by minus 4? Well, let's divide their magnitudes normally. 36 divided by 4 is 9. And because we had a minus, right? Both the numbers are minus. They are numbers with same sign. Your answer will again be positive. So your answer is plus 9 in this case. Let's take some examples for numbers with opposite signs. How about a plus 7 times minus 8? So you multiply the magnitudes normally. 7 times 8 is 56. Because the numbers are of opposite sign, the answer will be negative. So the final answer is minus 56. Okay, minus 9 times plus 5. Multiply the magnitude. 9 times 5 is 45. Because the two numbers have opposite signs, the answer will be negative. So answer is minus 45. Right? This rule is simple to understand, right? Multiplying and dividing. If the numbers have opposite sign, its the answer will be negative. If the numbers have the same sign, the answer will always be positive. Okay. Finally, 28 divided by minus 7. So let's first divide 28 and 7 normally. 28 divided by 7 is 4. And because these are numbers with opposite sign, 28 is positive, 7 is negative, your final answer is minus 4. Well, that's the end of this session. Calculation with integers, especially in the context of negative numbers. The three things that we learned was how do we add and subtract on a number line, or remember on vertical scales. We used the temperature scale and then we also used the floors, right? Apartment and the floors. Then we understood general rules for adding and subtracting numbers. And finally, we also learned about general rules for multiplying and dividing numbers. I hope you enjoyed this session and understood everything that was taught in this lesson. Thank you.